Hey everyone, it's Tiqqle, and in this video we're doing my 8.3 Enhanced Shaman guide. Let's jump right into it. Number one, let me first mention this is just one of many PvP guide videos I'm working on. I just came out with my UI video, which is important when we go over the damage rotation. I encourage you to stay till the end of this video, but this is the breakdown of what we're going to go over. Number one, too long didn't read version. For you quick boys out there, I'll give you the quick build, quick setup, quick rotation, go for. For stats, I'll just give you the priority. We'll go over talents, we'll go over Azerite traits, Azerite essences, we'll go over trinkets, which has become very important in 8.3 and in previous patches in BFA, and then we'll go over the damage rotation, including burst. Let's get into it. For the too long didn't read version, stack Natural Harmony, try to get an Ancestral Resonance, Rolling Storm, and a Thunderian's Fury. Otherwise, try to get Natural Harmony. Run these talents and these PvP talents. Run these essences. You want 20% haste and you want a ton of verse. And now let's get into the details for all of these decisions. Now to stat priorities. You might be surprised that versatility isn't number one because of Enhanced Shamans being squishy, but the fact is you need 20% minimum haste for your play style and your kind of momentum to carry you through games. What do I mean? Well, here's the deal. Enhanced Shaman is so heavily focused on melee abilities. Number one, meleeing will proc Wind Fury procs, which actually gives you a stacking buff with Forceful Winds. It also means that every time you hit your Flame Tongue, your Frost Brand, which you're talented for here, also are not doing as much damage. More haste equals more damage in a big way for Enhanced Shaman. The other big thing that people might not know if they're picking up Enhanced Shaman for the first time is this. Your weapons attacks have a certain percent chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Storm Strike. Wow, that's a big deal. Storm Strike being your number one damaging ability, that's big. But it also causes the next Storm Strike to deal 25% increased damage and costs no Maelstrom. That means you're actually getting Maelstrom, passive Maelstrom generation, quote unquote, by getting these procs, by hitting more often. You need to have 20% haste. Moving on, next you need versatility at the wazoo. That is so important because you are going to take a lot of damage. You have minimum defensives on a shaman. You really only have Astral Shift. You have some passive healing we'll get into later with the builds, but that's about it. So you really rely on versatility to buff you up a little bit. Next is mastery. Mastery because it actually gives you an increased chance to proc Stormbringer, which is a big deal as I mentioned before, and Wind Fury. It also increases your nature, your fire, your frost damage, but that's a little bit less so important, especially because we're not going for lava lash builds in this. Next are the builds. Number one, you have the Tanky build. This will be using Earth Shield. This will be using Fury of the Air and Memory of Lucid Dreams to proc a lot of healing. The other one is Big PP build. This is the big damn build that you're going to be going as offensive as possible. For Fury of Air build, really what's key here is to have Fury of Air, and also to have here is Memory of Lucid Dreams. Why is this the Tanky build, Tiqqle? Well, number one, Earth Shield. That'll be good. That'll give you passive healing. It does a decent amount of healing actually passively. You need to keep that refreshed. Next, Memory of Lucid Dreams. Your spells and abilities have a chance to refund 50% of the Maelstrom spent on them, healing it for you for 25k. Now in PvP, this is greatly reduced. It's not 25k. It's more like 10, 11, 12k, but it also increases your versatility by 400. 400 is a good, let's see, I'll just add another trinket, that's 250. It gives me another 3%, so I'm gonna have, in general, another 3%, 4% verse just passively. So that's actually also very good. That's gonna bump me up to 23%. If I go double verse trinket, it's gonna bump me up to 26%. That is very good, and that, working with Conflict and Strife, is pretty darn important. So that is why it gives you passive healing. And the kicker is Fury of Air. It drains Maelstrom, but it doesn't drain it that fast, especially with how often Rockbiter is up. And it spends Maelstrom every second. That means you have a 50% chance every second to heal yourself. Now this actually does heal for quite a lot over the duration of on a 3v3 arena match. In Battlegrounds, it's different. You don't necessarily have a healer. You don't necessarily have that long to live in some circumstances. And it's more based around spending Maelstrom, not getting hit. You would think maybe hitting things or spending or getting hit would give you healing. No, it's just about spending Maelstrom. That means it's just about time. So being in a 3v3 game with no dampening, you have decent amount of time because you might be line of sighting, you might be getting CCs going on. You're not always taking damage 100% of the time. So that's why it's a little bit different to test in a BG or to even test in 2s. I do not recommend this build for 2s. 2s is already in dampening. The healing is too far reduced. You need to go 100% damage, 100% offensive. This is a 3 3v3 tanky build. Now, you could take in this tree, you could take instead of shamanism, you could go, you know, swelling waves if you wanted to. But the thing is here, you also want to continue, you know, getting pressure out there. The one thing I'll say about this build is you could go full defensive, go ethereal, go swelling waves, go spectral recovery, but then you're not forcing pressure. I think this is a good balanced build for being able to put pressure out. Crucible of Flame actually still does a lot of damage. As I mentioned, having those globals to spend is very important, but having Conflict and Strife is very important to boost that versatility. If you have a piece of corrupted gear that increases your total percentage versatility, could be very, very useful if you have this build. I don't necessarily have those pieces that I can use right now, but I recommend you, if you do, percentage versatility is good, proc versatility is pretty good for enhanced because of the current state, but you also want, again, those offensives. You want those tentacles. You want those infinite stars. You want those Radan weapons, the gushing wounds. Those are the things you also want. So I think this is really the build to go for if you're trying to balance offensive and being a really big tank. Now, the key here is you should still spend Maelstrom on self-healing if you feel scared. If you're ever getting, or the healer's getting CC'd, you can spam heal yourself, and you should. If you are going against RMP, I recommend trying this build out. I recommend stacking versatility, and if you're going against RMP and you know you're going to get stunned, put Conflict and Strife as the major. If you're going against double melee, I wouldn't put it as the major. I'd put it as the minor, because you won't be in those full kidneys every 20 seconds. But at RMP, you take and you put Conflict in there. You would also put Conflict in general against Rogue Mage, anything in threes, in your major slot, because it increases your defensive perk from versatility by double, which is very important. You can see this down here in the UI. You can monitor that as well during games. And during my games, go to my Twitch VOD, check out what it looks like, how much verse I have. And I also have a UI video in case you're curious about that. All that's down in the description. Check it out. Now, this is the tanky build. The next build is for damage. Now, this is only slightly different. Earthshield still provides a good passive heal, and it is pretty damn good. Now, I do take Sunder here. Sunder is a ability that gives a 2-second stun, and it's off any DR. Well, I don't know about any DR, but it does also interrupt, so it can be very good against casters. Very important to use this against casters. Fury of Air melee cleaves, and whenever you think you're going to die fast, Sunder, Disruption, very good, and I'll show you a combo you can use with that later. For your essences, I would switch between Breath of the Dying Major and Crucible Major, depending on which one you would like more. I know some people are really enjoying Breath of the Dying Major. I personally have been switching between the two depending on what comp I've been running. But you also want to always have Conflict and Strife because you're probably going to be the target. Your Condensed Life Force here is good for extra damage, and I would also, if you go with Breath of the Dying, I can't switch it now, but Major, you can go focusing Iris Minor. The reason for this is it can increase your haste, which means more procs, more damage, and the cycle continues. So I recommend kind of messing around with this. I do think that Breath of the Dying can be a good option, especially synergizing this. When your team is going for the big dam, you pop that and you pop Sunder, or you pop Breath of the Dying after you call in your remote guidance device. We'll get to Trinkets in a minute. And that's the type of thing you want to start thinking about for how do you get big damage very quickly. On-use Trinket, Essence. Those are the types of, and Sunder, like 3 globals, that's going to do pretty big damage. So I would recommend you mess around with Breath of the Dying versus Crucible, but remember, you need to have Breath of the Dying somewhere in this tree because that minor does so much damage. Mess around, see what you're comfortable with. Do you have the extra globals? Okay, if you have the extra globals, use Crucible. If you don't, if you're getting Storm Strike procs out of the wazoo using Iris, go for Reaping Flame, go for Breath of Dying, go for those executes, go for the big dam. And so across both of these, you've probably been like, yo, what are the traits? What are the essences? They're pretty much the same. What you want to be focusing on is 2 minimum natural harmonies. You can get to 3, but it's hard to do that. You want 2 to 3 of those, which that increases your secondary stats. Fire does crit, Frost does mastery, Nature does haste. You also want to have, at least if you're running Shamanism, 1 Ancestral Resonance. This will increase the duration of that heroism, Bloodlust by 10 seconds. It's very important. It increases that duration every time you're popping it. Now, if you're going against RMP, you don't need it. You can just go for more natural harmony. So keep that in mind. You don't want to be giving Bloodlust to other teams. If they know that you have lust, which they assume you do, they will try to purge it from you. So you can just not use it sometimes, and it is okay. Now, otherwise, you want 1 Rolling Storm. Rolling Storm increases the overall damage of Storm Strike, but it it also gives you a free proc every 20 seconds. That's that's free Maelstrom. That's free increased damage. Very good. As a next tier, you want at least one Thunderian's Fury if you can fit it in. It increases the damage of Stormstrike, also increases the chance, or has a chance to drop a totem that increases your chance for Wind Fury. Other than that, there's some other fillers, but that's what your target is. That's what you want to go for. Now, for weapons, you really want 2 of the Rod End weapons, unless you have too much corruption. Rod End weapons give you a on-proc damage, and it actually does a lot. So I do recommend you get that. If you have Infinite Stars, if you have the Tentacles, if you have Ooze, I have the Ooze on my belt, low one, but it's still pretty good. You want to go for that. Next, let's talk a little bit about trinkets for the builds. I did mention earlier you want some high versatility one. Yeah, because you need to stack that verse. You need to get above 20. I'm actually too low. I have some pieces I need to optimize myself. Next, you want a DPS trinket or another verse trinket. I could go for this other verse trinket, but I'm thinking about it. I don't want to because I want that on-use damage. We're going to have very fast games as Enhanced. So that's why I'm going my motorcycle. The remote guidance device. It has a delayed damage effect, which means I can use that and then I can sunder, so then they both collide at the same time. One thing I haven't talked about yet is Ascendance. Ascendance does so much damage, but what I recommend for you is to use it when you get a proc. When you get a Stormstrike proc, that's when you use it, and you use that proc using Wind Strike, and then you start going from there. Another big thing to advise you on is when you use Ascendance, you need to be within melee range. You need to be within melee range so that the Stormbringer procs can happen. You need more to happen. You don't want to wait for the cooldown of Stormbringer during Ascendance. It's just not good. If you do opt to go for Thunder Charge can be used during Ascendance to get faster Wind Strikes. It is quite viable to do that. One other thing you probably noticed with the builds is I didn't go Feral Lunge. You can go Feral Lunge, and you can swap this tier out to Boulder Fist if you're going against caster teams. Just remember, if you do this, you will not have Nature's Guardian to fall back on, which is a proc heal of 20% of your maximum health if you go below 35%. It's okay, but just be aware of that, because Boulder Fist can give you a little bit more reach on your abilities. Your Rock Biter has a 20-yard range, which is pretty kind of nuts. That's almost the same range as my Hex. And Feral Lunge can be very good for a gap closer against teams that might be kiting you. A Mage, for example. So you want to be very careful there. And one other nuance is Ethereal, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, Ethereal Form, let me know in the comments. This can be very useful, and you can try to use it because this ability, what it does is it makes you so you cannot take physical damage, but you also can't attack or use spells. The other thing, it also makes you slower, so casters will destroy you, but it also reduces the cooldown of it replaces Astral Shift. After Astral Shift is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, Ethereal Form is on a 45-second cooldown. Meaning you could use this into Windwalkers for Touch of Death. You could just do this on fists if you're getting fisted. You could also use this against RMP. You could use this against a Rogue from Kidneys when you think it's going to happen and your healer CC'd. These are little nuances. Play around with it. It's still early in the season, but Enhance are pumping, and this could be a very good talent if you're going to play around it. A lot of people don't like taking it because it slows your momentum. It means you're on the back foot. It means you're not doing damage. For trinkets, there are some that I would recommend to check out if you can get them, and get them in a high item level from Mythics. Number one is the remote guidance device. It calls in a motorcycle, dealing 75k damage and additional damage. This does up to 100k damage when you press that button, so definitely get that. There is another trinket from the raid, which is, there is a boss. It is called Dressed, and he drops this, the Withering Segment of Dressed. This causes an eruption around you, doing 100k damage on normal. This does 125 around you, to people around you in a circle. Definitely good to check that one out. There's also some haste-based trinkets, like this one. This one places a ward on the ground, giving you a ton of haste, which is pretty good to link up with Ascendance, as long as they're within range of those wind strikes. Those are pretty offensive PvE trinkets for you to check out. You should also get and probably consider getting 2 big verse trinkets. So there's the insignia, and also the badge. There's also trinkets like the Spite trinket, which drops the puddle that increases corruption for people in it. That it might be pretty memey for you to play, and also try to get an upgraded safeguard, because that is also very important for a very defensive build in case you run into people like that. There's also this trinket, Humming Black Dragon Scale from the first boss. Very easy to get, very accessible in the new raid. I recommend that you get that if if you don't know what else to get. There's also this one from Mythic Freehold, which also gives you a whole bunch of different secondary stat procs, so that's also viable. So check those out. Malediction, I don't personally, I'm not that excited about it. I think there's a lot of other ones you can go related to haste that are much better. Last thing is corruptions. For corruptions, you don't want to go over 40. You want to stay under 40 and use the corruptions like Oozing Blood here, which is damage on some ability use or something. You always want to, I prioritize using the ones where if you do damage, it has a chance to proc more damage, whether it's the tentacles, whether it's this ooze, whether it's infinite stars here. One of those are your best ones. Secondary to that, you can use a percentage gained versatility or proc versatility. And then thirdly, after that, you could use Void Ritual. Void Ritual will give you those secondary stat procs and stack up. This has a decent uptime and it's kind of a good backup. But those are the main ones that you want to go for. Lastly, the Raden weapon is critical. It does so much damage. I swear to you, it does so much damage. On to doing damage. Now, if you want to have my UI, I'll put the link down in the description, but I have very simple things down here about tracking the Flame Tongue, tracking Frostbrand. I think it can be very confusing. What you need to know, these are second priority. These are your backup. These are your free globals. Frostbrand could be extremely useful for slows, but just keep that in mind, though. That's your backup. You want to keep them up ideally, and if you have free globals like this, you would want to use them. But as soon as you get this proc, as soon as you get that weak ore, as soon as you get that Stormbringer, you want to be throwing out those. Storm strikes. Your number one priority is Storm Strike, and that is so big. You want to make sure you have your Lightning Shield up. Lol. You want to make sure you keep those buffs up when Storm Strike is down, right? You want to be able to manage if you have full Maelstrom using Lava Lash. Okay, and you want to be using Sunder and Ascendance as your burst abilities. I recommend doing a few things. Number one, sync up Sunder with a Trinket on use. You might not be able to use it every time, but it's a good way to do damage. Ascendance is 3 minutes. You need to be careful. You need for that to be when the healer's in crowd control and you're about to go to Pound Town. Okay, using your essences, I definitely recommend using those almost on cooldown for pressure, but if you can line those up again with something else, it could be good. If I line it up with my bike, ready, I'll press my bike comes in, I use my essence at the same time, I just did almost 200k damage instantly at range. It's good. But now let's go back into the rotation. There's a lot of things that happen on Enhance and it can be overwhelming. Okay, the general rotation is this. You want to keep those buffs up, but your number one priority is Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Storm Strike. No matter what's happening, Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Storm Strike. You want to make sure that's on cooldown. So that's what we do. If I just sit here and I just Storm Strike, that's what I want. When that's on cooldown, we'll back it up with a Rock Biter to give me some Maelstrom. When Storm Strike's not back, I'll put up a buff. Frostbrand. Oh, I got a Storm Strike proc? I need a Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. You see what I'm saying? No, oh, I have a global. Let's use Flame Tongue. Oh, proc. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Oh, Frostbrand's off. All right, I'll use it. I could have Storm Strike. I should have Storm Strike. We Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Now it's on cooldown. My Maelstrom is up above 50. I have a weak ore that reminds me to Lava Lash. Let's Lava Lash. Oh, my Flame Tongue's down. Let's use it. Oh, Storm Strikes. So that's what you want to be focused on. Storm Strike is absolutely above everything else, number one. But you want these secondaries to be there. You want to be Lava Lashing to dump Maelstrom or really healing yourself. That's probably even better than Lava Lash. Because if we look at the damage breakdown, Lava Lash is doing dog poop damage. 20k is not bad for an average, but we're also in PvE land. So I would recommend you use heals a lot of the times. So that was single target. That's how it kind of flows without using any cooldowns. You can use Feral Spirits. That will do very low damage, but it will generate Maelstrom for you. Let's say I'm chasing a mage. Just for example, I'll burn my Maelstrom. You spend Maelstrom while healing. Let's say I'm chasing a mage around, right? And oh, dude, I can't really connect. I can only like use very, at range things, but my Maelstrom's going up. It's going up. I can heal myself. I can use, I can be spamming heals on myself or someone else, even while in a route. They're hitting for 2Ks. Overall, 65K, not bad, but I personally use that not when I'm getting a ton of Storm Strike procs. It's for when I need to keep momentum kind of going, or I need that Maelstrom for heals, or for just kind of free Lava Lashes. Now, with that being said, if I was going to do burst, I'd make sure all my damage is kind of rolling, and I want to wait for it. I want to try to get a proc. I have nothing. I'm only single target. Okay, there's a proc. I would go into Ascendance, and I would start Storm Strike. Storm Strike. Lava Lash, Storm Strike, Lava Lash. Not getting that many procs, Lava Lash. There's another one. I'll want to use that no matter what. I don't have any of my buffs up. I don't care. I want to use it again. Using Lava Lash, another proc, and now we're back. Definitely save Ascendance for when you have Bloodlust, because it will give you way more procs, way more haste, way more procs. Now, one thing you didn't hear me talk about is Crash Lightning. Crash Lightning is an ability that can fit into the rotation I just talked about, but it is when you want to basically use it when you don't have a Storm Strike, or there's 2 targets. If there's 2 targets here, I use Crash Lightning. Crash Lightning does frontal cone damage. What it really does is it makes it so my Storm Strikes hit both targets. One other thing that Crash Lightning does is it increases the damage of your Storm Strike by this much. It buffs it up to 30% when that was hitting for 5% per target. And so that's also another reason why you should cleave people with this. It hits multiple targets when you activate it, as well as increasing your Storm Strike damage. So now I'll Crash Lightning and I get a buff. And now my Storm Strikes hit both targets. And my Lava Lashes actually hit both targets. So see, it's still doing damage, and I'm not even pressing Crash Lightning. So now we'll Crash, we got a proc, and now I can do damage. What I recommend is if you're going against melee cleaves, or if there's even a pet there, to use Storm Strike and it will activate the cleave. And that will start cleaving. Maybe it's a Warlock pet that you can kill passively. But it also is very good against melee cleaves. I don't recommend using it against single target. It's not really worth it. And it does cost 20 Maelstrom. So that's pretty much how you do damage. It's all about Storm Strike. It's about not worrying too much. Don't be too hard on yourself for not having Flame Tongue and Frostbrand up. And to use Sundering on your burst, as well as Ascendance with Bloodlust. Now, the other one, I'll give you one more tip and trick here. When you want to CC targets, let's say there's 2 melees in front of you and you're getting pummeled. One thing that you can do, which is it's a very good trick, is you can do the cap stun into sunder into stun combo. This is very useful to stun multiple targets. What you need to do is have your cap stun available, capacitor totem. It takes 2 seconds to proc, 2 seconds to detonate, and then it stuns for 3 seconds. Now, luckily, Sunder stuns them for 2 seconds. So what do? You're doing your damage, and your buddy says, "Oh, we got to CC these guys. We got to go have a go." Okay, stun totem's out into Sunder. Sunder lasts into the 3-second stun, and it doesn't diminish in return, and you get a lot of pressure. So that is a really good combo for Enhanced Shaman to solo cause disruption by doing that. Now, the other thing I'll recommend you to do is if you have a stun totem, you want to press Earthbind and then put a stun totem on top of that Earthbind. A healer cannot run out unless they use mobility. They have to either shapeshift, monk, roller, port, or do something to get out of there. Otherwise, they will not be able to get out. That means you can CC a healer for 3 seconds by yourself, unless they kill it. So that's another tip. So I'll come out with more videos, guys, about tips and tricks for playing these classes, because I played them for a long time, and I learn a lot from you guys from stream, so I want to thank you guys for giving me tips and tricks on stream. But this is pretty much it, guys. We went over so much stuff. 2 different builds. We went over Azerite traits. We went over Azerite essences. We went over some DPS rotation, which is kind of finicky. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And with that being said, guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning into this video. If I learn anything more, if I experience different things in Arena, I will make an update to this PvP guide. So stay tuned on this YouTube channel. We will be putting out more Ellie, more Enhanced, more R Shaman stuff, and I will be coming out with more PvP guides. Once for Ellie, once for Resto, and I also have a UI video. I'm going to do a keybinds. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. So stay tuned, guys, and I want to thank you so much. We'll see you on stream. Have a good one.